Now, I'm going to lay out a couple of ground rules as we go through. This session is all about, around performance management, obviously, but we're going to talk about this from a standpoint of leading in a time of social distancing. So during this session, breakouts are going to be critically important. I'm going to be setting up breakouts, probably 6 to 7 in each. We'll have quite a few breakouts this morning where you will get a chance to meet other people. I'll keep the breakouts the same as we go through. And as you do this, during the first breakout, I'll ask everyone to introduce themselves to each other. You'll be with other leaders from other organizations. And I'm going to ask you to be as vulnerable as you can as we go through this. It's really about performance management and accountability during times like this while we're in a crisis, but at the same time during periods of whatever normal is and whatever that new normal is going to be after this. So a couple of ground rules as we go through. This will be about 90 minutes to 2 hours max. I will have a break if needed. My goal is to be around 90. We're going to be working hard. We're going to be engaged, rolling our sleeves up. There'll be times where I'll ask everybody to jot down some notes. And by the way, at the end of this session today, later today, we're going to send out all of the information that you're going to be exposed to today. And we're going to take a much deeper dive into a lot of the things. If some of you were on our webinar about a week ago, we're going to touch on some of those things around performance, but take a much deeper dive. So with that said, the agenda. How has COVID-19 affected you? We have to make sure that we set the stage. We have to set the stage for this event for where we are, where you are in your company. We have some companies that are deemed essential, some that are non-essential by the terms that the government uses. We want to talk through that. Obviously, accountability, and really from an accountability standpoint, we're going to talk about two things. One, the accountability for you as a leader, and two, the accountability that you put amongst your team. Peer-to-peer accountability. So how does each other hold each other accountable so not all the responsibility relies on you as the leader in your organization. We'll talk about performance management tools. And in some cases, we'll talk about sales metrics and different tools. What should be tracked? Why? What should be done differently? And how is that going to be tracked if you want to track it? And at the very end today, we're going to really talk about You Inc., You Incorporated, where it's going to be basically things specifically around you, how you're doing through this, your family, and I'll set the stage for that when we get to it. So we're going to be very, very engaged with each other. Now, when you think about relationships, from a leadership perspective, from a sales perspective, from an operations perspective, no matter what it is, right now it's about understanding the current environment. And you can build relationships for mutual gain with your team members, with customers, with prospects, et cetera. Giving and listening first. As we talked about on one of our webinars a couple of weeks ago, listening is very, very challenging. We had Linda Katz-Wilner, who's with us today, to talk about that as well. We have to be able to listen to understand. Build relationships by staying connected to your team members, especially in these days through Zoom and through other mechanisms. Building authority by adding value. And value sometimes comes in different shapes, sizes, and forms, because value could be really holding someone accountable to something that maybe you don't have. Maybe there's some comfort zones or some things you need to get through to actually add that value to hold someone accountable. And building intimacy as a leader by opening up and being personal, showing vulnerability, humility as a strength. Now, some of you may have seen this image. It's been going around, and I really do like it. It's really from a standpoint of how do I want to live during this? And when you think about where we are right now, there's 3 different zones, potentially the fear zone, the learning zone, and the growth zone. And when we do our first breakout in just a moment, I want you to talk about to the group, what zone are you in? What zone do you think your family members might be in? What about your team members? And what zone might your clients be in? And as you think about that, it's almost like we're in the middle of this of COVID-19, there is going to be an end. 3-4 weeks ago, there was a lot more people that probably had their heads in the sand thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Now we're looking out and we're looking at, okay, we're going to get through this. It's going to be tough. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be taxing, but we will get through it. So just think about that when we get into our first breakout. So to set up this breakout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get about 6 or 7 people in each room. And please have your video on. Your responsibility in this first breakout is to introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do, and then really talk through this from a standpoint of how has this affected you, your company, and your industry. Just talk about that openly. Let's set the stage. And after that, we're going to dive directly into performance management. So take about 10 minutes, enjoy, get to know each other, and I'll bring everyone back in and I'll throw some instructions out there in the messages while you're in your breakout. So bear with me. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So the purpose of that is to really set the foundation and obviously where you are right now, where your company is, so we can build on that foundation from a leadership perspective, kick the tires in some areas where we need to do a little bit of introspection for what we're doing as a leader, and talk about some new different strategies and techniques that make sense as we work through this and moving forward. So thank you for that. Now, a couple of things to think about, really from a standpoint of results. And from a leadership perspective, a lot of times we're focused so much on hard number results. What do we want our team members to accomplish? What do we want our business to accomplish? Where do we want to be? And all those results are more lagging indicators: revenue numbers, profit numbers, increase in customer market penetration, et cetera. But what really boils down to it is that there's not much you can do to control the actual results as much as you can the behaviors. The behaviors are the one thing that you can control. And we're going to talk today specifically about your behaviors as a leader when it comes to performance management and holding people accountable. And as we dive through that on a performance management standpoint, we need to set the stage in a couple of different areas. And one is, as a leader, when you think about yourself as a leader, I want you to think about this in 4 different quadrants. And as I guide you through this, I'm going to put up in 4 different areas where you think you are as a leader. And then I'm going to ask you to think about where your team members and perhaps others and your peers think of you as well. Now, on this axis, you have a task mindset and you have a relationship mindset. Task mindset is get things done. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's get things done. Relationship mindset means that we care about the relationship, what that person's all about, more about them, etc. So task, go, 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 get things done. Relationship, more about them and caring about the actual person. Now, this first quadrant over here, we have this leader that is very focused on the task, but not so focused on the relationship. They want to get things done. They want things to happen quickly. But if there's some carnage along the way, then they're not as concerned about that, right? That leader could be more that browbeater mentality. Let's go, let's go, let's go. I don't care how we get it done. The next leader is more down here. This leader has a very low focus on relationships and a low focus on tasks. Let's not spend too much time in this area because that's not good. If we're not focused on getting things done, we're not focused on a relationship, what are we focused on? Let's move on from that one. This one over here has a very high focus on the relationship. This leader loves people, loves engaging people, loves being around people, but not so much a focus on the task. When it comes to getting things done, they may be one that enables, one that will say, I'll just jump in and do it. May not hold people accountable because either they're afraid about taking risks, afraid that they won't like them. They have a high need for approval. So a manager in this area here, that's great if you want to have a lot of highly unproductive friends that work on your team. So that can be very challenging. Not that there's not a time and place for it. Up here is the leader that has a high focus on the relationship and a high focus on task. Now, being up here, that's utopia, right? I mean, to be of that mindset where you're always focused on doing what's best for people and always have your tasks and getting things done, there's going to be times where the leader might jump over here and then jump back. They might jump down here and realize that they're spending too much time looking on Facebook at what people ate for lunch or dinner that day and wasting time, and then they need to come back up here. Down here, is it okay to have the happy hour or to be engaging in today's virtual happy hours? But yes, we have to get back up here. So I want you to think to yourself of these different types of leaders, and I'm going to give you a chance to talk about this in a breakout shortly. Where do you see yourself operating most of the time? Balancing between getting things done, accountability, and building the relationship? More around the lines of just getting things done and might be some carnage along the way, staring out the window, watching too many videos, or just being everyone's friend. Then the question is, where do you think, if you had all of your team members in one room and you weren't there, and you were to say if there was no repercussions and they could vote on where they think you spend most of the time, would their answer be the same as yours? So just something to think about as we lay the stage here as far as where you spend most of your time and what the perception others have of you. And I'm going to open it up in just a few minutes before we go into a breakout to talk about this as a group. Now, this next one. This is a tool, and it's actually 2 pages. It's a writable PDF. And I'm going to challenge all of you on this call to think, on this webinar, to think about what this means for you in your business and you in your personal family life. And it takes vulnerability to do it. And there's 4 quadrants. And the first one is, what do I need to do more of? Okay. What do I need to do more of? And that item, whatever those things are, boom, 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 boom. It could be, I need to reach out to my team members more. I need to be able to interact in a different way. What's the impact if I do that? If the impact is not strong, then why do it? What do I need to do differently? Maybe I need to be more engaging with my team members, especially if a lot of them are remote right now. Maybe I need to set up, as you'll see later, weekly individual meetings with them on a coaching standpoint. What's the impact if I do that? Of course, what do I do well? All the different things I do well as a leader, and what's the impact of that? And then what could I do better? I put a challenge out last week to a few clients to fill this out and to really think about it from their perspective, not only with their teams, but with their family. And it was very interesting. And there were some that really had the guts to fill this out and send it back to me. And we've talked through it. And I'll put this out to everyone on this training session today, because we're going to send out these writable PDFs to think about where you are and think about one thing or 2 things you could do better and what's the impact. There also might be some ahas from a family perspective. So I'm going to open up real quick. I'm going to unmute everybody. And I'm going to ask you to think about this for a second before I put you to a breakout. When you think about, again, the last slide, where you are as a leader, task-oriented or relationship, and when you think to yourself, what do I need, what do I do well, what can I do better, what do I do more of, and what do I do differently, it takes vulnerability to do that, okay? So I'm going to put everyone into a breakout. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about from something you could do differently as a leader, something you could do better, something you could do more of, and what the impact of that is. Mention it to your group. I know I'm putting you on the spot. Mention it to your group. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about what that is. So take about 8 minutes in your breakout. One thing you could do differently, one thing you could do better, and one thing you could do more of, and what's that impact? See how similar that might be to other people in your group. So we'll jump into breakout now. All right, welcome back, everybody. Now, as you went through that, that's really to get us, I guess, get us going from a standpoint of sharing, understanding that we have to take inventory of what we do well, what we can do better, what we can do more of, and what we can do differently. And it's not easy to do that. It really isn't easy to do that. So thank you for sharing. More to come on that. Now we're gonna switch gears a little bit, and we're gonna talk about accountability and empowerment and what that means from a standpoint of overall performance management. I want you to think about this from two perspectives. One, from your perspective as a leader and your team, and two, your team as how they interact with each other. Now, accountability, pure accountability, and holding people accountable to behaviors, holding people accountable to behaviors that are going to lead to results is one thing. But if you don't have empowerment, and empowerment really is the ability to make decisions, the ability to have company information that's needed, to have industry information, to have knowledge. But without empowerment, we have blame. I told you had to get this done, but they're almost handcuffed, and it's easy to blame. So accountability minus empowerment equals blame. Empowerment, giving someone pure empowerment, you have the keys to the kingdom, make all the decisions you want, go for it, I'll be here when you need me, laissez-faire, minus accountability equals low performance. You just expect them to get it done, but there's no conversations. We'll see you in 6 months, as an example. That's low performance. But accountability plus empowerment equals high performance. And when you think about that from a standpoint of being a leader, oftentimes we can do one of either, empowerment or accountability, and not both. Now, the blame cycle can be very tricky. It can be a very slippery slope. So when you think about that from a team perspective, it's really important to take inventory on what we're measuring, how we're measuring it. Are we spending too much time managing results? How your numbers didn't come in this month, or the project did not get completed on time. We're getting complaints from whoever it is that we're working with. Those are all lagging indicators. What are the behaviors that we're managing throughout the month, throughout the day? What type of questions are we asking to get an idea of how a meeting went with a customer, to how a job's going with a contractor, whatever the case might be? Are we inspecting the behaviors, or are we spending too much time focusing on the results? What I want you to think about when it comes to that is from a teamwork perspective, accountability is really the willingness of team members to call their peers on performance that might hurt the team. Another word for that I like to call the salad in the teeth theory. Let's just say I'm looking out there and I see Linda. Linda, would you mind? I'm going to unmute you for a second. Can you hear me, Linda?
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
Okay. So Linda, if you and I went to lunch and an actual lunch, once we get through this, and we're finishing our lunch, we're done, we're walking out, and I noticed you had a big piece of salad right there lodged in your teeth. Now I have a choice. I could either say, Linda, I know you're heading into a meeting after this, after our lunch. You got a big old lodge of salad right there. You might want to remove that. Would you appreciate that if I told you that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? Because you don't want to walk out and to go to that meeting with that salad on your teeth. Now, I might in the back of my mind think, oh, she's got that there. That's embarrassing though. If I mention that to her, I just don't know. And so there's a different, but if I don't mention it to you, it's not doing you any favors. So you could take that example and go to your team, right? And go to your team for anybody and say, are our team members, are they comfortable with the salad in the teeth? And what I mean by that is if another team member realizes that another team member has either said something to a customer that may not be right, I mean, let's face it, here's an example. Here's two people in an office. Maybe there's one desk here, two different cubes, whatever it may be. And one person hears the other person say something that's totally wrong to a customer. And that other team member, well, maybe they looked at them wrong in the morning at the water cooler or whatever it is, and they say, oof, they're going to be in trouble when that comes out, and don't say anything. Or do they go over and say, hey, you know what, Bob, I noticed you mentioned this to the customer. You might want to think about that and call them back because we changed that policy and you might want to let them know about blah, 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 blah. Now, sometimes interactions like that can go sideways because Bob might be defending himself. Oh, I knew that. I was going to call him back anyway. Why are you telling me that? If that's the atmosphere they're in. Or Bob can look at that person and say, you know what? Thanks for bringing it up. My gosh, I can't believe I missed that. I appreciate you doing that. That's team member accountability from performance. That all stems up to the leader. As a leader, are you setting the stage for your team to be able to hold each other accountable? To be able to, again, the salad in the teeth, so you are not the only person in your organization, per se, that can deal with things or corrective action. So really think about that. And then this next, I'm going to ask you to think about 3 questions. These are 3 basic questions around that. And I'm going to send out these slides when we're done. I just want you to mentally think about where you stand with these 3 questions. It's usually, sometimes, or rarely. From a team perspective, your whole company is a team. We call out one another's deficiencies and unproductive behaviors. It could be very direct. It could be more subtle. It could be a major thing or a minor thing. But we tend to call out another's deficiencies or unproductive behaviors. Like the example I gave with talking to Bob and say, Bob, you might want to call that customer back because we changed that policy. Usually, sometimes, or rarely. The next one. We are deeply concerned about the prospect, about the chance of letting down our peers. Or is it one of those things, well, they're going to get what's coming to them because it's a dog-eat-dog world? Or do we not know? Do we usually do that, sometimes do that, or rarely? From a team perspective, again, leader A has 10 people reporting to him or her. Do those 10 people, are they in an atmosphere where they feel comfortable going to that other person, calling them out on whatever it is and having a discussions? Or is it, I'm not going to deal with that, that's so-and-so's, that's the leader's responsibility? And lastly, we challenge one another about our plans and approaches. Think about your team meetings, okay, with your team. Someone brings something up. Is there an atmosphere as a leader where people can speak their minds, they can challenge, without worrying about stepping on others' toes, without worrying about feelings being hurt, without worrying about getting into an emotional issue, if you will? Do they have the mindset, if you feel it, say it, and realize it's for the betterment of the team? Rarely, sometimes, or usually. So anyone, as you think about that and think about your team, what I want you to do right now is go into another, I'll call it a table discussion. And matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead. I'm gonna switch my background. So I am now in the training center. All right, I just boom moved from my mission control, my basement, to the training center. Now, what I want you to do is I want you in your breakout session at your breakout tables, your virtual tables, is talk about performance management from the team perspective, thinking to yourself, how does my team do on these 3 areas? Share with others. And share with others your perspective on that and why it's important for the leader, and we'll talk about how the leader does this shortly, why it's important to have an atmosphere where the team members can do that and what that would do to a business. Take about 8 to 10 minutes in your breakout. All right, welcome back, everybody. So when you think about where you are with this and when you think about your team, I want you to think about everything you just discussed and apply it to these four things here on this slide. A team that avoids accountability. Okay, when I say a team, and I'm going to preface this by saying, again, using the example, leader A has 10 people on his or her team. And that atmosphere can be one of, from a performance management standpoint, where that leader is the one that does all of the performance management, all the accountability. There's no accountability among team members, or in another scenario, that team understands that it's okay to hold each other accountable. It's okay to have tough conversations, because it's going to be a more collaborative and more open, less stepping on each other's toes. So a team that avoids accountability in that first scenario, there's resentment. There's other different standards of performance. There might be some leaders that hold some people, no matter what their role is, could be operations, could be sales, could be any type of role, where we're going to be relying so much on those couple of people that we're not paying so much attention to the other people on the team. Typically in any organization, you got your high performers, you got your movable middle, then you have your low performers in any role. And either we're focusing so much on getting a lot out of these high performers, not really dealing with any of the issues with the lower performers, or having candid conversations, and we're not sure how to move the movable middle, and they're not communicating with each other. It could encourage mediocrity without peer-to-peer accountability. Deadlines on deliverables could be missed, because again, number 4, it places a severe and undue burden on the team leader as the sole source of any, and I use the words corrective action or discipline, if you want to call it that, coaching. So I want you to think about that from that standpoint. Now, I'm gonna actually open it up for a second. I'm going to unmute. And I know on a webinar like this, it can be tough sometimes. I'm just curious if anyone wants to talk about either side of this, where team members feel comfortable having tough conversations with each other, or on the other side of it, where it's so much of a burden on the leader that you want to be able to have team members to be able to either call each other out or have tough conversations. Any thoughts on that from anybody?
I would just say it's important for it to be structured.
Structured, yes. In what way?
You know, you don't just want everyone calling out everyone all the time for every little thing. So it's very important for it to be a structured, constructive criticism.
Absolutely, Chris. And it really goes back to, from that standpoint, and I'll bring up the next slide around that. It's around having, to that point, it's clear expectations, right? Understanding that we want you, i.e. all the members on the team, to feel comfortable being in a situation where you can, if you hear something that was said to a customer that's incorrect, or a report that was done that was wrong, rather than saying, oh my gosh, well, they're going to be in for it when they submit that, to have a conversation with them. So it's clear expectations, what's expected, transparency in communications, understanding that a mixed message or just without any clear expectations around what that is, almost like a subliminal message, oh, I thought you would have done this, is not clear enough. The leader needs to model that accountability, to be able to say in meetings, to be able to recognize when actions have happened with team members that have helped each other and worked through problems. Checking in, we'll talk about weekly individual meetings in just a bit, and obviously encouraging growth and learning. What are they doing to grow? So really from that standpoint, taking inventory on where your team is right now from holding each other accountable. Now let's focus on what we can do as a leader from a performance management standpoint, and let's start to turn that page there. So I'm going to put it back on mute just for a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about some various tools, and you're going to get all of these tools. And inside of these tools are, they're designed for any type of role of leader. Again, it could be a leader of sales, could be a leader of operations, it can be a leader of accounting. It really doesn't matter. Now, from a standpoint of behaviors, you think about this from a standpoint of where you are, okay? Managing the employee life cycle, recruiting, hiring, turnover. Where do you stand in your business right now, okay? Where do you stand? Is there too much turnover? Is there not enough turnover? Think about just in different stages of your business and different, is it seasonality? What does that mean for you? And this is where you'd have to be vulnerable. Now, if you're the CEO of your company, you'd be doing this on yourself, and it would be your assessment. I mean, these would be one and the same. If you're in middle management and you have someone that you report to and you have others that report to you, you would give yourself a rating, and then your direct report would do the same. You talk about where you'd want to be and what that action plan would be. For example, onboarding. You think about where you are right now, and you think about, okay, what's going to happen in the next couple of months when we either begin hiring again or we start to grow and hire in the summer or in the fall, whatever that may be. What is that onboarding experience like? And what does that 60-day, 90-day plan look like? And one thing I can tell you is that it's interesting. You could have a room of, say, 20 different executives from one company, 20 different leaders. Let's just say it's a larger company. And if you were to ask the question of all these leaders, when do you expect an employee in this role to be adding value to the organization? What are the odds that everyone's going to say the same number of days? It's very slim. Some may say day 1, others might say day 100, day 30, day 10, day 50. Well, without a proper onboarding plan, what to do, who to focus it on, what kind of knowledge they have to get, where they should be, and how to check in on that, it's kind of a crapshoot, and no one really knows when they should be productive. So there's complete onboarding plans that we'll cover in other sessions as well that are very tactical to help people with onboarding. In general, setting goals, coaching my team members. From a business perspective, sales forecasting for your business and funnel management, time management. Where do I stand with that? Especially in an environment where maybe you're not commuting, obviously right now, to the office every day, and you have an hour back or 2 hours back in your day. How are you using that? What does that look like in your world? Building methodologies and systems in your business, managing organizational change. Again, these are high level for you to look at yourself. Again, if you're an entrepreneur, you're looking at yourself in both of these categories. If you're a leader within a business, you're grading yourself and you're asking your direct report to give you their feedback. Again, it's transparency, and it's really designed to think about the gaps that you have for your different management behaviors. And the last one, of course, is professional development. What does that mean for you? What do you need to focus on? What's the action plan to get there? And what's the impact once you're there? So this is one tool. Again, you're going to get this tool, and we'll talk about this as far as what you want to measure when we get to the breakout sessions. Another tool from a standpoint of a cookbook. And when it comes to a cookbook, anyone on this webinar right now that if you may not be an executive chef, I'm certainly not, but I know we've been having a lot of home cooked meals here basically every night. And if I follow a recipe, then that meal should turn out okay. If I follow a very specific recipe, it should turn out really, really good. If I'm a really good cook, it's probably even better, or I might change a few things in there. Now, from a cookbook, this is just a sample. And my challenge to everyone on here is to really think about what things you need to do with your team on a regular basis. For example, debriefing status meetings. This is a sample. Is it once a week? Well, we need to have a meeting to debrief the status on projects. It could be very obvious, whatever that is. Customer meetings and conversations. Actually asking questions about how the meetings went. What happened during those meetings? What was the outcome of those meetings? Who was there? What type of questions did they have? How can we use this to better ourselves in future meetings? How many coaching sessions do we have? Again, this sample is 3 a week. Role plays. Now, if you asked a group of people, if I asked everyone on this call right now, do you like role plays? The answer may not be overwhelmingly yes. The answer might be no, they make me uncomfortable. But it's skills practice. Again, no matter what your role, no matter what type of role you're in, it's like going to the driving range. Role playing, having tough conversations. role-playing having a tough conversation with a customer, role-playing a sales meeting with a new prospect, whatever it is. Recruiting calls, always be thinking about your business and bringing people on. Coaching, weekly individual meetings, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. Business books read. This particular sample, it's one a quarter. Maybe it's same for you, or it's one a month, but just think to yourself, what type of book should I read on a regular basis? Customer satisfaction surveys. And if anyone's interested, we have various templates for customer satisfaction and internal satisfaction surveys. You can please reach out and we can talk about that and share those. And community networking events. Right now, networking events are virtual. But when you think about what's happening in your business going forward, one thing you might want to think about with your team is on a networking side or association side is thinking, okay, what associations is my business a part of? And because what you're used to doing during a normal year, well, most associations, whether it's trade shows, whether it's whatever it is, have postponed obviously everything, most likely into the fall. So as a leader, are you taking inventory of all the different associations, groups that you're in, and reaching out and saying, hey, when fall comes, we'd like to be a part of this. What can we do? Would you need speakers at this event? Would you need support? And just being ahead of that from a networking and community standpoint. Your goal would be to determine how many of these different things should you do on a weekly basis and a monthly basis. And then when you have that laid out, obviously, is to act on that behavior. It's all about management behaviors. Consistent management behaviors will obviously lead to results. Another tool, and this is a behavioral gap assessment when it comes more on the sales side and general account management side. Now, this could be for anyone. It could be a project manager. It could be a salesperson. It could be someone in operations, no matter what it is. How do they rate themselves on their own behaviors? And maybe it's checking the box, getting things done on a daily basis. Maybe it's number of outreach calls. Maybe it's, again, project related. Where do they rank themselves on 1 to 10? And this can be used right away with your team members. Where do you see them on those behaviors? Where do you want them to be? And what's the action plan? Again, different categories here. Could be lead generation. What do we have in the pipeline? Could be building relationships with people. Maybe it's taking advantage of making sure that their LinkedIn profile is set up from a standpoint of visibility. Maybe it's reaching out to different centers of influence in the industry and reaching out and doing that. What's the management assessment of that particular situation? Qualifying opportunities, making presentations, servicing customers, account management, all these different things are just examples of where your team members would be in any specific point of time, what your assessment of that is, where do you want them to be on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 and high, and what's the action plan? It's very visible, it's behavioral related and not results related. The results will come once we have those behaviors in place. Next is a very, very basic tool, and it's the WIMS, Weekly Individual Meetings Builder. And it can be very, very simplistic. It could be on a Monday. It could be a Monday call, Monday Zoom call, a Monday meeting. And what do you want to achieve this week? What are your goals this week? On Friday, okay, how did that go? How did that meeting go? On all the different projects you were working on, where do you stand with that? And what help do you need from me? Most of us, if not all of us, have already had these types of things, especially a weekly meeting, ingrained in our business. But is there a process? Do you need to step it up? Do you need, especially in a remote times we're in right now, having it on the Outlook calendar on Monday, a 15-minute check-in with your team members? What do we want to accomplish this week? And on Friday, and what do you need from me? On Friday, how did we do? Where are we at this point in time? All of this revolves around performance management. Now, the other thing I want to show before we go into a breakout, and different companies have different ways of looking at this, In many organizations, there's a formal performance appraisal, and some organizations have gotten away from the annual performance appraisal and doing more quarterly check-ins or monthly check-ins around behaviors and results. This is just a sample, and this is, again, a writable PDF. Keith and I, we're going to send this out to everybody after this call, and it's literally a general performance appraisal. And the rankings: 0, performance is significantly below; 4, performance is significantly above. Now, some of the things we're looking at right now in our organization, we're used to being in the office. Now we're all working out of our home. So we're going to talk about looking at this for each other right now. Is how is this working right now in this in-between time? Might want to think about that with your business. If your business has been greatly changed because of COVID-19, and obviously from the work environment standpoint where you're working, what are the different things, responsibilities right now you want to work through? And on the next page, just different productivity, the appraisal criteria, what does that look like? Again, you might have something already in place. Most of you probably do. This might also be something you can look to implement later, or implement now, whatever makes sense in your world. It's a template and it's a sample for you to look at. So here's what I want you to think about. We talked about very briefly and succinctly 4 different tools: cookbook, behavioral gap assessment. Again, it's all about the behaviors that you want to measure and the metrics that you want to put in place. What I'd like for you to do at a high level in your group for about 10 to 12 minutes is talk about what should you put in your business? What might you need to change in your business to be more transparent with your team? What might you want to do as far as when you get all these tools after this afternoon and you think about next week, which of these tools would make sense for you to get acquainted with and implement in your world? And if you do, why? What does that look like? So take about 10, 12 minutes, talk about what metrics, behavioral metrics might make sense in your business from a performance management standpoint, and we'll come back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Now, so when you think about the metrics, and again, this could be a tough conversation with ourselves as far as how we want to hold ourselves accountable. These tools are designed to take an introspection at your management behaviors and then getting feedback from others. So when you think about what to put in place, the challenge that we have for you is when we send out the follow-up is to think about, A, what do you want to do? Again, what do I need to do better? What do I need to do more of? What do I need to do differently? And really think about that managing behaviors versus managing for results. Results are critically important, but they happen as a amount of consistent behaviors. There are emotions that come into play, in particular when people think that from peer-to-peer level, again, so both aspects around that. What I want you to think about now is there's been some questions around the sales aspect as well. And from a sales perspective, again, no matter how your business grows business, either it's through centers of influence, direct prospecting, whatever the methods are, advertising, whatever the methods are, it's important to think about where you are heading. And this is one of the things that in most conversations that we're having with clients, it's around what is that ideal company that we're after. In some businesses, we have a chance now to hit the reset button. You think about all the different things that are going on. It's a level playing field for all organizations right now, no matter what the industry is. And that level playing field means that do we need to look at the type of business we're working with? Do we need to stay the course and continue to work and work with those types of clients? Do we need to adjust a little bit? Do we need to think about where we're looking for business? And this tool will help you with that literally in any type of industry. So what are the characteristics of my typical sale? The average sales cycle from a time where we get something, we're bidding on a project, whether we're with other companies, could be 2 or 3 other companies we're going against, or we in by ourselves. How long does that typically take? What is that typical amount? How many different products and services do we have in that, if that applies? To whom do I sell? Is it, are they CEOs? Are they project engineers? Are they VPs of operations, whatever those roles are? And how do I get there? Is it through networking? Is it through word of mouth? Is it through just the stability and consistency of our business? Whatever the case is it marketing? Is it direct sales? The ideal size of that company, does that need to stay the same? Does that need to change? Again, we have an opportunity to reset. The location, do we want to expand our footprint? Do we want to stay specifically in one particular region or one particular city, whatever that is? What are they currently using or doing? Now that's really important to think about. Companies will either be using another company such as yourself or another vendor to be using, to be performing those services, or they're doing it themselves. And if they're doing it themselves, what's the pain involved there? Are they frustrated with their current company they're using? Is it improper, frustrated at the procedures, at invoicing, at turn time, at quality, at all those different things? What are the different things they're frustrated with? And what could be some industry triggers or issues that you could be looking for to expand your business? If you're mostly focused in one particular vertical, does it make sense to think about where the competition is? Are they shifting? How are they shifting in this current environment? And what do you want to measure, and what types of industries and triggers are you looking for? And then lastly, the ideal company profiler, who is it that your company speaks with? What are their individual pains? Because what a lot of times you hear is, say, if we're only dealing with one person in an organization, as far as understanding how to close business and move forward, there's probably other contributors, other players that maybe we don't know about. Maybe it's an engineer that has a say in it, but we never talked to that person. How do we find out who they are and what their pains might be? So that's really just an idea. Do we want to hit the reset? What's our ideal company we want to look for, and how do we measure that? And how do we get our team involved, getting them involved in this process as we do that? Now, from a pure prospecting perspective, it's really just thinking, what are we doing now? Is your company doing touch calls, reaching out to people right now, reaching out to your customers? And instead of a cold call, we're calling it touch call, to be able to say something like this. Mr. and Mrs. Customer, it's Chris down at ABC Company. Obviously right now with everything going on, in the midst of all this craziness, face-to-face meetings are just not happening. I'm just reaching out to check in to see how you were doing in the midst of all this craziness. And that could be a touch call. That's reaching out, and that's connecting with your centers of influence, your different customers you work with, different folks in your network, and touching base with them. That's a prospecting activity, and you can determine what the frequency is. All of these, you could be thinking to yourself, hey, is this the time for me to reinvent my LinkedIn profile? Whether or not you're a business owner, a salesperson, operations, whatever it is, should I upgrade my my LinkedIn profile so I can be connected to my company and have everyone in my organization be on social media in that method? So again, just different prospecting activities, some now, some for the future. And lastly, around that, again, from a business perspective and growth, thinking about growth as an opportunity, because this is an opportunity to lead. What are the different activities? And what's my goal if I do that activity? If I reach out to my contractors, if I reach out to my vendors, if I reach out to them, what is my goal of how many I should reach out to and touch base? Again, it could be a simple touch call. That's just some ideas around moving business forward and making sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to that. Now, what I'd like to do, and we're going to take about 10 minutes and we're going to wrap up the session. What I'd like to do during this last part of the breakout, before we come back and do one general wrap up around performance management, is just to simply kind of break the mold a little bit. And all I want you to do in this breakout right now is to talk about how you're doing. Be vulnerable. Talk about how you're doing as we migrate through this. What are you doing to break the monotony? What are you doing to take care of yourself? As I've mentioned on some other calls, I have a workout facility about 40 feet behind me in my basement. And there's been times where I've walked by and say, you know what, that'd be great to go in there and I should do that. And I've continued walking. I don't have a commute right now. I don't have, there's a lot of different things that are going on. So why aren't I in there? So yesterday I got in there and now I'm very sore today, but that's good. So that's no pain, no gain. What are you doing with your family? How are you doing personally? Are you reaching out to extended family? Are there different conversations you need to have with others in your business? So make this just flat out, how are you doing as we migrate through this? Be very open, share, and then we'll come back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I've unmuted everybody. It's so important to really share, especially in days like today, how you're doing, what are you doing to break the monotony? And it is funny. I've heard a lot of people say that they're introverts and they're saying, you know what, that extrovert thing may not be too bad in this day and age. So I really appreciate you doing that, and talking about how you manage those different types of things. Now, as we get ready to close out, I just want to touch base on a couple of things. One, when it comes to performance management, it's really important to obviously to be there as a leader, to be there, to be present, to listen, to ask questions, to perhaps bring up things that may not be too popular, but to be able to talk about things and have difficult conversations. And it's so important from a team aspect for the team to understand that they should feel comfortable doing the same. What happens is that a lot of times emotions can be involved, or again, stepping on toes. So one of the things we'll talk about, and we'll send out information as far as our May session on this, is more around the how to have some of these tough conversations, how to have consistent coaching conversations, what to stress on, how to care enough to expect excellence from your team members and from yourself. Also, it's really balancing inside. We all have our core identity, and at Sandler, there's one of the core concepts is identity and role, and separating our identity and our roles. And sometimes we take feedback from other people, especially when it's performance management, as an attack against our self-esteem, against our self-worth. But really, it's designed to go for the role performance. How can we be better in that role? And it's not an attack on someone's self-worth and self-esteem. And from an attitudinal standpoint, it's important for a leader to be able to establish that, talk through that, in order to manage performance on a regular basis. So with that said, I can't tell you how appreciative we are to have all of you joining us today. Are there any, before we break up, it is Good Friday, and I'm wishing everyone a very nice Easter weekend. Anyone have anything on that note before we end on a casual level?
Stay safe, everyone.
Yes, stay safe, engage. What else? Anything else? I like that one.
I'm going to be making some Easter baskets for my grandchildren.
Very good. Very good. That's important. That's important. It is Easter weekend. It's going to be a little bit different. I think we're going to Zoom our family in on Sunday. I told some of you before, we had a Zoom call with my parents a couple of weeks ago or last week. It's all running together. And that was funny. My dad was able to tell some dad jokes. He was happy. So it's just important to really think about different things we can do in this time. Thank you so much for joining. Expect a pretty detailed follow-up email around this, around performance management. Keith and I thank you. Our whole team thanks you. Have a nice Easter weekend. Be safe.
Thank you.
Be healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy
Thanks.
Easter, everyone.
Happy Easter.
Happy
Thank
Easter.
you.